It's very rare you get this many people signing their name to something. So to start this video, I'm just going to begin with a quote. Here it is. "One of the worst video game launches this decade." That is what forced nearly 100 developers to take a public stand against their management. And here's their message to the CEO. "CEOs need to take a back seat. Let the skilled people who remain forge the path ahead." Yes, so that's what the developers behind Mind's Eye have basically said in an open letter. It's one that decries their leadership for their game's release. And, Mind's Eye didn't really have a great release, to put it lightly. But also more than that, for the unbearable mismanagement they say they endured. And they have a simple message, one that names and shames leadership for their hypocrisy. "Mark Gerhardt and Leslie Benzies, you often refer to your employees as family, but we ask you to consider, is this really how to treat your own?" Holy shit, that's scathing. And to be the complete opposite of that, you'll want to hit up boot.dev because the world needs better developers. You can be one of them. They are our sponsor, and I don't promote them just as a news pundit. I'm a BEng computer science, and my god, Boot teaches incalculably better than I learned. They are the best way to learn back-end development, and also one that is made specifically for you and me, because it's structured like a role-playing game, and it's got soul, it's got the sauce. Hell, the founder Lane hit me up years ago when they were starting because he's also a WoW player. And back then they were new, but now they've got over 750,000 students who have done over 33.7 million lessons, which is kind of wild. Now, Boot is all about learning back-end development from the fundamentals right through to advanced career-focused training. You'll be doing personal projects, portfolio pieces, and fun things like making a real Pokedex, but, not some little front-end mock-up, like a real one that works server-client. But here's what matters, right? Knowing the real fundamentals. That's something that maybe the new wave of untrained vibe coders doesn't often fully have, often to funny and security nightmare-related results. Though I love the energy, and Boot's the way to back that energy up with the fundamentals, which, by the way, here will be in either TypeScript or Go, all in a content-packed, well-designed, and motivating structure that actually has soul. Boot is truly fantastic, and you'll get 25% off your first purchase at boot.dev/Bellular News. And if you're not happy, they'll refund you on the spot with a 30-day money-back guarantee. Plus, you can go and sample all their course stuff literally for free. So if actually learning how to code and to engineer is something you're excited by, just go check them out because they're awesome. Mind's Eye's launch in June left us calling it one of the worst games of 2025. Certainly, it was one of the worst games relative to its budget. It was a single-player open-world game that came from Leslie Benzies' studio, and Leslie's a fairly big name in the industry. He is actually one of the minds behind Grand Theft Auto. This time round, it was a mess, in the bad way. It was buggy, quite uninspired, just a general disaster. But something clearly had went wrong during development. Nobody would actually plan to release their game like that. And indeed, a lot went on during development, and funnily enough, they had a humongous and eminently investable games plan that didn't really go right, leading to Mind's Eye having to be, to put it mildly, shat out. Allegations on sites like Glassdoor painted a dire picture, one of management failures, and when we first covered Mind's Eye, we wondered when, not if, staff would be held responsible for their leadership's decisions. It obviously didn't take long because within 2 weeks of launch, Build a Rocket Boy, Barb for short, announced plans for redundancies. Of course, UK law required advance notice. IGN reviewed an internal email from management. Here's how they framed it. A shift from, quote, an intense development and launch phase to, quote, sustainable post-launch support. Now, to the credit of the remaining staff, they have done relatively well with their post-launch support. Really, credit where it's due. Recent Steam reviews for the game sit at 84% positive, all 57 of them, mind you, and that's after a 30% discount in the autumn sale. And they're now up to update 4.1. There's more missions, better stability, perhaps driven by season pass obligations they do need to deliver, but there's been more work going on behind the scenes than just game development. Now to the inciting incident of today's video, a newly published open letter that just dropped. It's signed by 93 current and former Barb employees. They accuse leadership of, quote, long-standing disrespect and mistreatment of your staff. Here's what the letter says, right? That most of the 250 to 300 layoffs happened in the UK. So they're working with the Independent Workers of Great Britain Union, and their demand is the leadership must change their ways. Reasons why include a lack of transparency, unbearable overtime, disastrous redundancy handling, and this all started before the launch even happened. Staff claim they faced mandatory overtime for 4 months pre-launch, 8 extra hours per week. Statements from employees allege serious consequences. Here's a quote: "Some horrific mental and even physical illnesses beyond even the typical widespread burnout." So that was already bad enough, but the reward for the overtime was actually a bit worse. It was 7 hours of time off for every 8 hours worked. Of course, they haven't been able to take that time off. Why not? Well, because many of them are on redundancy notice. But also, Barb's leadership says post-launch updates are, quote, high priority. So that very positive recent review score in Steam is, I guess, an adequate enough reward for them. They won't need that accrued time off. But of course, what this does is create additional pressure. These staff are now picking up the slack left by departed people. Now, these redundancies were apparently handled abominably. Here's what employees said, quote, "We believe you have consistently mishandled the redundancy process, causing confusion and distress for staff. Employees have received misinformation, been handled dismissal notices with the wrong notice periods, and put in the wrong teams so that their performances were scored by the wrong people. These and other errors have potentially resulted in the wrongful dismissal of dozens of staff members." Of course, that last part goes beyond mere criticism. That's because wrongful dismissal is what some staff are taking legal action over. Okay, Barb's leadership faces a war on 2 fronts here. The open letter is the first part of that. It's a public campaign from staff to drum up support. The letter calls for 4 changes from leadership: a public apology for their mistreatment and proper compensation for laid off staff, for those still on notice, which is many people, to have options to actually take their promised leave so it doesn't just go kaput. Also, a commitment to working with third parties so that any further redundancies are handled fairly, and also documented efforts to ensure company structure. This includes recognizing the IWGB as a trade union that is representing staff, and we will come back to that one because they've got a pretty key role to play here. So basically, staff are trying to do what they can here, and that, makes obvious sense. You get whatever power you can, you drum up public support to try to advocate for your side of things. And they want to protect themselves and, of course, their livelihoods from the mismanagement of this game and its disastrous release. Now, the union, the IWGB, helped facilitate the open letter. They helped to make the public aware of the allegations against the Barb leadership, but that's not all they're doing. They are also filing multiple legal actions against Build a Rocket Boy. The claims, well, things like a failure to carry out fair consultation ahead redundancies, plus multiple cases of unfair dismissal. And there's things, at least with UK employment law, that you gotta do right. So incorrect notice periods, that's bad. Performances scored by wrong management, that's bad. Those things are actually grounds for real legal action. And this is action that individual employees, well, might not manage alone. They're newly redundant developers. They may be a little bit more busy, trying to somehow find a job in an industry that has also seen massive layoffs over the past few years. So many layoffs that we can't even give you an accurate number. It's hard to track. Now, to state the obvious, none of this can turn back the clock. You can't just pretend that, a union is a magical wand and you go, woo, and now everything's better. No, the financial realities are the financial realities. It's not going to undo how staff claim they were treated in the past. It's not going to somehow, mean that, the workers' rights have all suddenly been respected and look at that, money has appeared because everyone's decided to go and buy Mind's Eye and Steam. That stuff's not going to happen. But what staff are hoping for is a bit more realistic. It's this: union-backed action that would ensure they are protected in the future. And they actually just got an incredible example from somewhere else in the UK. It's basically proof of what can be achieved even with famously controversial management. You see, that's because there's a reason why they're working with IWGB on this letter and on the legal action. Because IWGB backed unionization at Zaum, which, is the studio behind Disco Elysium that completely descended into utter chaos. There's battles between managers and other managers, owners and other owners, staff and managers and owners, and absolute chaos that's also fragmented into, probably at this stage, 50 successor studios. It's all very silly. But if the IWGB got that union recognized by its leadership, then perhaps they'll have something to offer. Let's talk about them then. The Zaum Workers Alliance has a claim, and that claim is that they're the first recognized video game workplace union in the United Kingdom. They've been so since early October, and following negotiations, an employee committee will now meet with management regularly. And this is stuff that is backed by IWGB. They assisted in both the formation and the recognition negotiations, and here's what's striking. Management at Zaum recognized the union, and that is in stark contrast to the company's historic behavior toward employees, which has been documented all around the internet. A union representative spoke to GameIndustry.biz. They basically said that the last round of layoffs and cancellations drove this formation, that recognition alone took 6 months of work with the company management. That's not quite how the Zaum president, Ed, tells the story. Now, he's relatively recently hired, and he suggested negotiations were actually fairly positive. Quote, "What I was actually pleasantly surprised to hear was actually, things are not bad here. We have it pretty good, but let's work together to make it even better." That's a rather sunny spin in things, but Axel, who is a writer at the studio working on their game Zero Parades for Dead Spies, maybe puts a slightly different tone in things. He suggested that the president's cordial public tone here doesn't really capture the full story of what actually went on. That's the story of how it was actually difficult to achieve this, because the whole thing involved 6 months of negotiations, so not just a quick, easy breezy thing. But here's maybe what matters more. It's that with recognition, the staff have now got some legal leverage. They now have tools that they can use at the company going forward. And within the UK, something new actually exists, and that thing is experienced developers and union staff who can go around the place helping other studios, helping them do things like form collectives to protect themselves against management. And that, of course, is what they were able to do here with Build a Rocket Boy. But now you understand why the IWGB and Build a Rocket Boy staff are basically hoping to follow the Zaum path to kind of achieve the same thing. Union recognition is one of their key demands, and the reason why is because they can see some fairly obvious benefits to getting that. There would be material support. It's why they've been able to, as an example, take legal action. Now, of course, I know whenever we cover a union story on this channel, there's almost like a trained response. You say union and some people immediately go, "Oh, union good, amazing," or other people go, "Oh no, union bad." I suppose what I will put into the picture is, this is just about power structures and the alignment of incentives. Unions can be good and bad because people can be good and bad. I think in this case, if we're looking at, say, a case of genuine wrongful dismissal because people were like mixed up and evaluated by the wrong people and a whole bunch of weird shit, that is actually a time where it is good for the staff to be able to have teeth. Because look, nobody wants redundancies to happen. I don't think anyone's pretending that suddenly a union can mean that redundancies don't happen. No, like the redundancies will happen because of a material financial reality. However, if there's a little bit more teeth, then there will be a better incentive for those redundancies to be done right, for it not to be some bizarre fucking cowboy show. And based on what we can glean from this story, well, I don't think a company that somehow manages to make the wrong people redundant, I don't think that's good for like shareholder value. It's like, oh, bad news, guys. We've let go the wrong people and now we don't have the skills that we need. Very strange. So if developers can hold leadership accountable for missteps, then developers can do their job properly. And that's what the developers want to do. They want to make great games. They want to be supported by leadership. They don't want to be interfered with in a negative way by leadership or, of course, by mismanagement. And perhaps if the interests of employees actually have a seat at the table, maybe there'll be someone there to say to management, guys, this is not realistic. Because no matter what way you cut it, the launch of Mind's Eye, the way that it happened, that was good for no one. And how many times in the industry have we seen situations where, at a fundamental level, leadership were just completely disconnected from what was going on the ground? So maybe, if employees have actually got a seat at that table, whenever they say, hello, leadership, this is completely not feasible. We will have to crunch so hard that we will screw the team. This game will be a disaster if you actually publish it. Maybe if they can say that, and they can say that earlier, before things are a disaster, because often, people on the ground will actually see the bad thing coming before people far away from the front line, then, you know, maybe we'll have some better managed projects. Maybe that'll mean we got some better managed games. Maybe that'll mean we can, I don't know, have a better allocation of resources in the game sector. Wouldn't that be nice? Anyway, that's this video. My God, what a messy thing. But, you know, it's a messy world. And that's quite evidenced by this story. Battlefield 6 is awesome. But did you know that it kind of killed a studio that involved a Halo co-founder? Well, yeah, quite a story. You can learn about it here.